You don't know what happened when you take a huge cocktail of all these drugs that alter your physiology and even your mind.
Cannabis truly is a pharmacy in a flower.
Survival comes with cooperation.
Pleasure is healing.
You're being a warrior of the weird.
I'm Lex Pelger, Director of Education at CV Sciences, and this is the Lex Files. Dr. Julie Moltke is one of those kind, caring doctors who takes the whole-body approach to medicine. From her superhero base in Sweden, called the Mindfulness Manor, she educates, sees patients, and does research on holistic health, the cannabinoids, and how to alleviate that corrosive bane of modern life, stress. She's also been trained in how to manage Swedish forests and how to teach yoga to people. Doctors used to be some of the most broadly studied professionals, and it's a pleasure to talk to one who is keeping up that tradition. Please enjoy this healthful talk with Dr. Julie Moltke. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today with Dr. Julie Moltke. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And you're coming to us from a beautiful farm up Sweden way.
Yeah, exactly. I used to live in London, but I have this family farm which I took over from my dad in 2018, and I started like a retreat center here, which is like that's where I am now, and it's been a great place to be during this pandemic. So I feel very fortunate and lucky to be here.
It seems like your various works come together really well with your work as a doctor, and I had two questions about that, actually. First, how did you get interested in cannabis as a medicine? And then how did you, before that, get interested in being a doctor?
So if we start from the beginning, like with the doctor question, I think after like college, I wanted to go out on like some adventures, exploring, like getting to know the world a little bit. And so I did like a 9-month gap year, working a bit, like working as a volunteer, and I went to Costa Rica, and there I was working as a volunteer in a children's hospital, and I always really liked working with people, and I especially enjoyed like working with children, but then I also have always been like quite academic, and I enjoyed like learning. I especially enjoyed like biology, but also psychology, and just like the whole like understanding the human nature and the human body. And so when I came back from those adventures, I decided that I would either write a book and become an author, or I would apply to become a doctor. And so my dad, he was quite keen on the second option, the doctor option, and so I applied for medical school in Copenhagen. And that was how that started. And then you go forward 7 years, like lots of clinical, like lots of reading and learning, clinical work. And we're in 2016, and I'm doing my residency. And then I'm kind of like faced with a lot of patients where I don't really know what to do. They have like I work as a GP at that time, and like people with mental health concerns, stress, anxiety, minor depressions, but also just people with chronic pain, and like a lot of these people are getting lost a little bit in the system because we don't always have like good options to help these people. Who are kind of like falling in between being like very ill and well, and then I just became extremely interested in holistic health and like finding out ways that were non-medical and more kind of like treating the root cause of the problems. So from that point on, I got really interested in like so-called alternative methods that can just be like an addition to the traditional or like conventional medical work. So that was when I learned about medicinal cannabis and CBD. And like the first time I heard about it, it was actually some of my patients in the clinic where I work, in the GP clinic, who were coming to me and saying that they were using it, and I didn't know anything about it. And like in the beginning, I was just like, well, I don't know anything about that. Like, do what you want, but like, I can't like give you any advice because I didn't know anything about it. We don't learn about cannabinoids or the endocannabinoid system in medical school as things are right now. We just learn about the dirty drug like marijuana, and how it can give you a psychosis. So I couldn't really give any guidance. But then as I dived more and more into this holistic functional medicine, working with plant medicine as well, it was just like a natural interest into cannabis as well. And then I moved to the UK, where my partner is from, and we like settled down in London. And suddenly there's a like really interesting opportunity came up for me to do lots of work within the cannabis industry. And I did lots of public education, and I started a blog, and suddenly the whole thing took off. And now I also work like with patients. And prescribe cannabis, and so it has been a bit of a journey.
That's great. It sounds like a very natural unfolding of your interests.
Yeah.
And before we get to the more on the cannabis side, I was wondering if you could share more about what it's like to be practicing holistic medicine and advising people about the various methods that are open to them.
Yeah, so like the way that it is for me is that I work both with conventional medicine. I work part-time as a child psychiatrist, but and then I work in a pain clinic where I prescribe medicinal cannabis, and like in both though, and then I have my own practice where I do holistic consultations, and so I do work like with all kind of like sides of it, but I always try to incorporate the holistic side into like whenever I practice, I try to have that in mind, because I think that should be the first line treatment. You know, before you start giving like someone sleeping pills, you should make sure that this person knows about sleep hygiene, that they knowing about stress reduction and like how to reduce stress to improve their sleep. And like the thing is that like many of those very easy and very accessible methods are coming from this kind of holistic world, like the yoga world and meditation and mindfulness. So it's a lot of like, you know, using our body, our breath to affect our nervous system to kind of calm yourself down, instead of like using drugs to calm yourself down. You try to use your breath as the first line. And then of course, like for example, even when it comes to things like chronic pain, it can be extremely helpful with mindfulness practices, because it's also about how you relate to the pain. It's not only about the like, you know, that you are feeling that you do feel pain, of course, but like, how do you relate to this pain, and how your mindset is it like part of you, or can you actually make it like like something which is a little bit out from yourself? And so I think that I always use these holistic practices as a first thing, like diet, breathing, yoga, exercise, stress reduction, and also some of the like the herbal treatments that you can use that are just a bit more mild and don't have the same side effect profile as most conventional drugs. So this way I integrated with a conventional practice, and I make sure that I have tried those things before I recommend people. For example, I also work with menopause, and like, so before I recommend someone to take HRT, we look at their diet, we look at their exercise, we look at their like, are they stressing a lot? Do they sleep enough? Like all these kind of things, because like you can change a lot from targeting that first.
Do you ever get pushback from people who don't like it because it sounds too easy, or they just want that shiny red ruby seconal instead of valerian root, and to steal from Fight Club, and mindfulness practices?
I mean, definitely, and like even in my profession, so it's not like all doctors who are interested in these like so-called alternative methods, and some people go to the doctor to get a quick fix because like whatever, like the lifestyle that led them to their problems, it's like too deeply ingrained in their habits to want to change that. So what they want is like something to cover up the symptoms. And of course, like then you can prescribe like like antidepressants, or you can prescribe sleeping pills or whatever the problem is. You can prescribe insulin or metformin or whatever like drug you need to cover up that specific symptom, but you're not treating the root cause. And the thing is that these people continue to suffer because these drugs are not a cure. They only treat the symptoms, and they don't treat this. It's not like they will make the symptoms disappear. They will just somehow make them more manageable. But the drugs also have side effects. Then you suddenly get these different issues. And this is the reason why in the aged population, you see that polypharmacy is a huge problem. Like most patients that you see over 75 will have 5 to 6 different drugs that they take. And, even though these drugs have obviously been tested and run through clinical trials and everything, but we don't know what happened when you take a huge cocktail of all these drugs that alter your physiology and even your mind. And so that's why I know that it's definitely harder work to do things holistically, but that's also how you stay well and how you implement like wellness and health into your life instead of just becoming more and more sick. But you're right, of course, sometimes you get a pushback, and because like what most people want is just like a doctor to fix you. But that's rarely what happens unless you have like a sore throat or, you just need a little cream for your rash.
And what you said earlier about pain made a lot of sense, that mindfulness meditation can help remove you from it. And I think we underestimate how strong that can be. And it reminds me of something I heard from a rabbi in Israel who had a spinal cord injury that was incredibly painful. And the reason he liked medical cannabis was, he said, unlike opioids that kind of doped them up and covered up the pain, medical cannabis didn't really make the pain change that much, but it put it more away from his awareness, and it didn't dominate things as much. So do you think you can do that as well with your mind, as well as using medical cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that statement, and we see that a lot in our patients, and that's also why it can be quite tricky to measure how well medicinal cannabis works, and like why we're now getting a huge pushback towards medicinal cannabis because they're saying that it actually doesn't work. But I mean, it's a very interesting point because you might say, oh well, it doesn't have as great an effect on the pain as opioids, but it makes your general life condition way easier to manage, and the pain is kind of like ending up somewhere next to you where you can deal with it, and not as kind of like taking up the whole space of your body and your mind, which is what happens when you're in pain, right? You can't focus on anything else, and here you get a tool which is, we put the pain over here. It's there still. It still feels painful, but I mean, like I'm me, the pain is here, and then you get back that quality of life and the sleep and the mood and stuff. But yeah, I think that mindfulness can do the same. Meditation can do the same. Like especially when we're talking about these mental health conditions, which I work a lot with, which is kind of the pain of existing in a way, like a different kind of pain, but which is also being perceived as very painful. Like I would say depression is when you feel that your existence is painful. And definitely the mindfulness and the meditations and the yoga can kind of help you to become the observer of that pain instead of being devoured by it, so that you can see that the pain is there, but you can also see that all emotions, all sensations, like all thoughts come and go. And it's the same with pain. Like if you ask a pain patient to focus on their pain and tell you say, so how does the pain feel now? And then, 5 minutes later, where is the pain now? And usually it moves around. I mean, pain is not just like stationary, and it's the same with emotions and thoughts, like you can't really hold on to any of these things. They're like, it's always in fluctuation. So that's where like the mindfulness becomes really handy, because you kind of like learn to observe the coming and going of these things, instead of being fixated in it and like feeling that it is like you are the pain, or you are the like the suffering. You can kind of like see it as things that are coming and going in awareness, which is what you learn with these practices. Does it sound a bit weird?
No, it speaks to the power of the mind. I think it's amazing how much of this stuff is true and how much you can affect. But it also speaks to how unpleasant it is to do that kind of work. I woke up this morning, I'm like, house is empty. I could do yoga and meditation by myself. But instead I read and scrolled. And it's just so much more difficult to contemplate this work that is difficult. It's like running an internal marathon. And so I was wondering, when people come to you, what are some of the first things that you suggest to them? Is it yoga and meditation? Are there others?
So it depends a lot, like why they approach me. Like recently I've been working a lot with people who are stressed, and so that affects obviously all aspects of life, but sometimes fertility, sometimes it's been sleep, and of course it affects like everything else, from your like relationships and the way that you see yourself. But what I do is usually to go through like a very thorough, at least like a half hour conversation where I like kind of to understand the full picture, and then it's all very personalized. Like sometimes I run functional tests to see, is there anything that can explain this from like a hormonal point of view. Is it that the estrogen is broken down in the wrong pathway? Is it that there's too low progesterone, or is it simply like that the cortisol is like sky high throughout the whole day? So I usually try to like at least do a little bit of detective work to figure out what's the lifestyle like, what kind of like social and like work conditions does this person have, and then also look a little bit at the biochemistry, and is there anything particular that is there one route we have to go down? And then from there, I will usually like, let's say it's a person who's stressed, I will usually implement slowly, like small or like help them implement small changes, but you have to do it quite slowly, because otherwise it's like super overwhelming, and also then the habits doesn't really stick. So I do often start with like if it's someone who's just really 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 stressed, it's difficult to sit down and meditate, but then I ask them to take like breaks throughout the day. So this can be like 2-minute breaks every hour, where I ask them to go like to sit quietly and focus on their breathing, like breathing, inhaling like to 4 and exhaling to 6 or 8 or something. So you get the longer exhale, and you kind of like try to switch into this parasympathetic mode where you're more in like a rest and digest instead of always being hyper alert. But we also work a little bit with kind of like the person, you need to be motivated. So I need to know exactly what it is, like the goal of the patient, and like, what kind of direction do they want to go? Like what kind of changes do they want to make? And then of course, I will look a little bit at, is there anything we can do to help? So to support, for example, the lowering of the cortisol, there are like certain like herbal treatments, like this root from the Ayurvedic tradition called ashwagandha. It has been shown to lower cortisol, and given together like with, for example, magnesium, and sometimes I use cannabinoids like CBD, but a supplement regime which supports the biochemistry and the lifestyle, so that so these supplements, that's not like to fix things, but it's to make it easier to transition into like making these changes and implementing the meditation in the morning or whenever it works. But it depends. Like for some people, meditation is just not it. Like they need to go from it from a different angle. Like they, for example, it can be like going for walks every day, or like, but just doing those changes where you get breaks. Like we're so bad at taking breaks in our society. It's crazy. We are. You just said it. You were like reading and scrolling, and I just came also directly from another meeting, and like we're terrible at giving ourselves like time to breathe, right? So it's really, when you're so busy, your mind is really contracted all the time, and sometimes you need the mind needs to relax, because that relaxes the body and the nervous system. And we need to be more into that relaxed state, like into the parasympathetic state, because otherwise we are breaking down. Like cortisol is a catabolic hormone which breaks down our body. It's like really not great. It's a stress hormone, and we need to make sure that we're not just spending too much time in that like stressful, hyper alert state. And you can really do that by focusing on like implementing these very easy exercises, like a 1-minute break in every hour. Come on, that's not that hard to do, is it? You put a little timer on your phone, and what do you think, Lex?
It's true. Yeah, but it's still a little intimidating. It's funny how it works.
Yeah.
Even a little bit of changes. I like what you're saying about starting small.
Yeah.
Enough that you can actually get it done. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about stress from you, because you've studied stress in children. It sounds like you work with a lot of elderly patients who are dealing with stress. How much does stress play into just everything you see every day as a GP?
In the work that I do now, just to take an example, like with the children in child psychiatry, I see that stress is probably a bigger factor than we think. So I work with a lot of kids with ADHD, and like one of the incredible psychiatric Dr. Gabor Mate, he wrote many books on like ADHD and on trauma, and he's been doing like really groundbreaking work in that area. But he is also he's saying that it's the reason why we're seeing such a rise in ADHD, and also like in like all countries, is because there's so much stress around these children, both in the parents, so like in the immediate environment, but also like the schools are demanding way more of the children than just like when my dad was a kid. There are many more. You have a guy. How old is your child?
Sophia is 3 years old.
Yeah, so maybe she's not old enough to have that many demands. But we just have to perform from a very, very early age now. There are tests from your, like, maybe depending on the country you live in, from your 6-7 years old, and so I think that there's a lot of stress, like even when we're pregnant, we're stressed because we need to do everything at the same time, and work and go through pregnancy, and plan for this baby to come, and like there is, I think it's fair to say that there has never really been so much stress in society as we see today. Also, maybe a lot caused by our social media and the availability that we always just connected. So I see stress as like a really damaging factor in like for our physical and mental health, and that's why I decided to work with it, because I could see that, like, whether it's a work-related stress or just like financial stress, or it's stress like relationship stress, they all lead to the same physiological changes, and those changes are so bad for you. Like they affect our mental health, like makes us more prone to stress and like depression and anxiety, and like it predisposes to heart disease, Alzheimer's. It worsens your sleep, your immune system. So it's just stress is a little bit underestimated, and I think it's super important to focus on when you're treating other things as well, like for example autoimmune disease. It's all connected. Like when we're stressed, our body is under attack.
And you mentioned the importance in pregnancy, and congratulations, because you are
Thank
pregnant
you.
right
Yeah.
now. And my wife is also pregnant right now, which is exciting. And I wondered if you could just talk about how these practices might have helped you during your pregnancy and perhaps with some of the people that you work with.
Mm. Yeah, so I mean, on a personal level, I was like super excited when we got pregnant. It wasn't exactly planned to be now, but we were really happy anyway. And then, like as soon as I hit week 5 or 6, I just got like my hormones just went totally out of whack, and I felt like, first of all, like super fatigued. I've never felt so fatigued in my life. Like I was in a 5 weeks jet lag, but I also felt really low. I mean, I felt depressed. I was just like, who is this person? Like, which mind has I just like dropped into? And there it was definitely, I used the mindfulness a lot, because it was kind of easy to ask yourself, like, why are you feeling so low? You're having a baby, like with the guy that you love and you're going to marry, and like what like why are you feeling down? Like what's wrong with you? And like, but I was just really using those like to be able to observe what was going on and like not judging myself for it. Also to kind of let the feelings come and go and not be too attached to it when I was feeling down. Like, no, I knew first of all that also it was very much connected to the change in hormones in my body, but also I was just aware that it was probably like in half an hour I would feel a little bit different. So I would just observe the feeling and allow myself to feel down when I felt down. And then I was actually also slowing down a lot with my activities. So this was before I started my part-time job in psychiatry. So I was mostly working from home and having consultations and doing work like this, education and stuff like that. And I just decided, okay, now is maybe the time to not overplan and kind of like, it's okay that my focus is completely gone, and and I just feel like that I open my laptop and I look at one mail in 1 hour. It's, you just have to have that kind of like self-compassion and like kindness towards yourself, because otherwise you're going to be your own worst enemy. So I use the mindfulness a lot, and I try to do like a yoga every day to make sure that I felt, even though I felt really tired, that I at least like I knew that I would feel really good after. So I stuck to my good habits, because we were talking about habits earlier, and like of course it's like difficult to implement in the beginning. But for example, for me, I've been meditating now for like 5-6 years, and now it's a little bit like I wouldn't go to bed without brushing my teeth. If I forgot to brush my teeth, I would get up and brush them. It's a little bit the same for me now. Like if I wouldn't get up without just doing at least like a small meditation. And like when I forget, like once in a while, like if it's a really busy day or I'm out like staying over at friends and I just don't do it, and I feel it straight away. It's like, you go out there and you haven't brushed your teeth, it feels terrible. And I go and I haven't meditated, and I feel like so reactive straight away. Like suddenly my partner is like, why haven't you cooked those eggs yet? I mean, I'm down now. It's time for breakfast. Like I become like a worse version of me.
Sponsor time, and it's one I'm very proud of. CV Defense. It's a daily supplement for supporting the immune system. And while there's no CBD in this one, it's a hell of a list of ingredients. There's zinc, an essential trace element for proper immune function. There's selenium, a mineral essential for cellular defense. There's vitamin A, that's essential for skin cells and the lining of mucous membranes, which protect you from the outside environment, and vitamin D, a vitamin that you probably hear a lot about already. And then for the big kicker, PEA, palmito oil ethanol amide. This is one of the best studied components involved in the endocannabinoid system. It's actually something produced by our brains and bodies endogenously, and it's the ingredient I'm most excited about. It took me days to go through and categorize all the research that's been done so far on PEA. Dozens of clinical trials, hundreds and hundreds of papers. Go look it up. It is a fascinating molecule, and there's a reason it's being hailed as the next great ingredient for stimulating the endocannabinoid system, and hence the immune system. I'm so glad that we have a product featuring PEA because I think it's so powerful. And then, last but not least, reishi mushroom extract, often called the mushrooms of immortality. So as always, we make no medical claims for these products, but they might make you live forever. And in the highest praise I know, when my wife, who knows a lot about these things, looked at this list, she nodded judiciously and said, "That looks really good." To try it for 20% off, use the coupon code LEXFILES at cvsciences.com. That's great to remember to stay diligent and just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask how all of this came together at the Mindfulness Manor that you're at now, and what things are like at the family farm and leading yoga meditation retreats there.
Yeah, that was actually it's a good question, and it came together from I would say a bit of personal distress. I think we all find ourselves like once or twice in life, or even more. Sometimes we find ourselves in a place where you just feel stuck. And after my residency, I was in that kind of place. I was just like, I felt that I didn't have the tools that I wanted to help people, even though I spent so much time in medical school. And then at the same time, I felt like a lot of internal stress and pressure because I was taking over my father's company and the farm here in Sweden, and I was just a little bit afraid of not being able to take over and manage this big responsibility that I felt it was. And at the same time, I felt like, how am I going to make this my personal work? How do I fuse it with this long education which I took? But so when you have these kind of questions and you don't have the answer, and obviously the questions they keep on moving around in your mind like crazy, and suddenly it becomes like this obsession, and it's not like you get the answers just because you think more about the question. So at the end I was like, okay, I need a little break. I need a little breathing, a little time to breathe. And so after taking over the farm in 2018, I stayed up here and I learned a lot about forestry, and I did some courses in Swedish forestry. And then I went to Bali, and I spent 2 months there becoming a yoga teacher as well. And that was really that time out there to connect to myself, because I had been, like most other people, probably driven a lot by external factors. What does my dad think? Does he think I'm doing it good enough? What kind of doctor do I want to be? What kind of doctor? What's my friends doing? What kind of doctors are they becoming? I was measuring myself a lot, comparing to others, and suddenly I just spent 2 months connecting to my inner compass. And that was really, I would say, where I kind of there was a U-turn there, and suddenly I was like, wow, okay, I'm gifted with this incredible place, which I took over from my dad. And of course, it's also a responsibility, but it's also a gift, and it's mine to create something that I believe in. So I thought that I would start slowly with these retreats, focusing on mental health, and especially what I said, connecting to yourself, and doing this by using these methods like mindfulness and yoga, but also by just taking it, by just slowing the pace down, and as well using nature. The nature here is incredible. Like we're just by the lake. There's the most incredible Swedish forest surrounding us, and so I just thought that this would be a really healing place to open up to people and not just use it as my own home. So that was how it started, and it's great. I love it. I mean, it's one of the most rewarding things that I do. I must say, it's also sometimes hard work, and sometimes there's it's not everything that's that fun, like all the marketing and the admin, and it's obviously it's a small business, so I do most of it myself. But like when you have these retreats and you see how profound, like what kind of transformation this can have in people, you're just like, I'm in awe. This is so important, this work, and I love doing it.
That's great. So you can manage a forest, teach yoga, and prescribe weed to people.
Good combination, right?
It's probably not bad, except probably not in Sweden, right? Aren't the laws there still pretty strict on cannabis?
You can prescribe, but it's a very long process. Like you have to apply, and it takes like the whole application is an hour, and I don't think any Swedish doctors are doing it. But where I prescribe is in Denmark, so that's the pain clinic that I work with and work for. That's located in Copenhagen, which is not more than 3.5 hours from here. So either like now during the pandemic, I've actually been working from here, prescribing to pain patients and patients with spinal cord injury, and then I go to Copenhagen as well to work in the clinic.
And this is probably a good time to transition to more of the cannabis questions that are so interesting and can be so tricky to answer because it's so different for everybody. And maybe to start with the pain, what are the best practices for people dealing with serious pain and cannabis for how to use it?
Yeah, so I mean, when we're talking about chronic pain, medicinal cannabis it works best for neuropathic pain. So that means either some pain which originates from the nervous system, the central nervous system, or like the nervous system somehow. So it's not like really great for like if you hit your knee, like hurt your knee. Cannabis is not going to do you much good. But where cannabis can really work, it is when you have like, for example, a trauma after like surgery, so post-operative damage to nerve. It can be spinal cord injuries, and then people with fibromyalgia, and so that's also considered like a central nervous system pain, and so for those people, even like people with headaches, migraines, and other kinds of chronic headaches, they tend to have a really great effect of medicinal cannabis, and this is often cannabis which is quite high in THC. So obviously, when you talk about the cannabis plant, it has a lot of different active ingredients. These are called cannabinoids, and the two most famous ones. I mean, you obviously know all about this, but the two most famous ones are THC and CBD. And CBD is good for many things, but it doesn't really work that great for like acute pain. Whereas THC is the one that has been shown to work really well for this neuropathic pain. It's good to have them in combination, of course. And yeah, so that's in Denmark we have this like a 4-year trial period, like 4 years where you can prescribe medicinal cannabis, and that's mostly if you have tried all other approved pain drugs. Wow. So you need to have tried the opioids, you obviously paracetamol and ibuprofen, but also the antidepressants, so amitriptyline and Norepinephrine, and then you also have to have tried stuff like gabapentin and Lyrica, and so you have to go through a lot of drugs before you can try the medicinal cannabis, and that's usually flower. But I can say I can still prescribe it to people who hasn't gone through all these drugs, but then you can't get like, you know, that it's funded by the government, like it's subsidized when you have tried all the other approved treatments, then you can, like, you get help to pay for your cannabis because it's really expensive medicine. But if you have just, like, let's say you just tried a few paracetamols and it didn't help, and you're not interested in going through, like, trying all these drugs with all their side effects, then what we can do is we can prescribe, like, the oil and tablets and stuff. So capsules, not tablets, capsules. Yeah.
That's sad, actually. I remember the big glaucoma case that got cannabis approved in the U.S. He had to go through something like that. He had to go off of his cannabis for a while and go through all of the things to finally prove. And then he won his court case, and they had to start sending him governmental cannabis in the U.S. And a few people got into that before it got shut down. And it was a terrible thing to do to a patient, to make Robert Randall, to make him pay for all of this and lose some eyesight going through it when he had an option that worked. That must be frustrating as a researcher sometimes, and as a caring physician.
Definitely, it's a huge point of frustration for the patients as well. So yeah.
And that's actually something I was going to ask. So here might be a good spot. If you got a big grant for studying cannabis science, what would you be studying if we could get you enough to put a couple hundred patients through something you wanted to look at?
Yeah, so, like, I actually recently did a study or like a survey. So just like it wasn't actually a clinical trial, but I was just looking at what people were using it for, and so, like, the reasons why they used it. And I would love to be able to continue, like, looking at this like in a clinical trial setting. So it would be incredible to be able to research whether CBD actually helps people sleep as they claim. So I think that this would be something that would be super valuable to look at cannabinoids and mental health, and, like, especially the cannabinoids that are available over the counter. Like, so I think that it's that's something that really interests me a lot. Like, to see, for example, like how cannabinoids work against anxiety and stress and sleep. These are things that I work a lot with myself, and I would love to learn more in a bigger, like, more structured clinical setting. So I would probably choose to go down that route. There's been so much research already, but sadly the quality of most of it is not good enough to be, like, for it to be actually validated by most of the medical profession, because we need to have these clinical trials, and they need to be big scale, and it's very difficult to do with medicinal cannabis. It's like you can do it with the isolated ingredients, so, like, with one cannabinoid like THC or CBD, but it's very difficult to do that, like, with the flower, because it contains so many different ingredients, and it's so hard to isolate all these factors.
And that actually speaks to the ingestion methods that you mentioned earlier. And, people smoke it, they take it orally. There's all kinds of other methods that aren't used as much. How do you counsel people on ingestion methods and what might work best for them?
So it depends a lot on the kind of problem or indication that I'm prescribing it for. So I would say that people with chronic pain, and where they have, like, intense pain, which comes periodically, they tend to have really great benefit of the vaporized cannabis flower, because it works the fastest, like the quickest, and then they can kind of, like, dose it throughout the day, and then like, they might take an oil or even a capsule with oil in the morning or in the evening to still have, like, a base concentration, and then, like, just use the vape when needed. And we have, like, huge, like, big medical vapes called, like, the Volcano is called, and and they don't look like the little vapes that normal people use. These are made so that it's extremely safe to use. That's one way you can use it. And then of course, there's a Sativex, which is a sublingual spray, and Sativex is like CBD and THC in equal amounts, and that's actually an approved drug and has gone through phase 1 to 3. And that is sprayed under the tongue, and this is helping people with multiple sclerosis. Though I do hear from I also work with some patient organizations, and I do hear from the actual patients that many of them transition back to legal cannabis because they find that it works better than than Sativex and the isolated cannabinoids. So that's the spray. Then obviously there's the oil, which you use it as an oil to make sure that you get you put it under your tongue and try to get as much absorption into the blood vessels in the mouth, but it's not a very effective method to get as much out of the cannabis as you can. You get way higher concentration when you vape it, but one thing is when you use the oil, if you take a capsule, it's important to take it with a fatty, some kind of fatty ingredient, so fatty meal, an avocado, or anything with a bit of fat in it, so that you absorbs it with the fat, when you produce the bile. So some nuts left with fat, healthy fats, and so that's an important point, that you just don't take it there on an empty stomach and it's just going to go all through your system, kind of. So those are some of the methods, the ways that you can use the cannabinoids. I know that some companies have, in the more kind of health and wellness space, they have been developing tampons with CBD on it, and there is different drinks and teas and I don't know what, but obviously that's not what we use medically.
Gotta go back to good old days. The Egyptian papyri have a honey preparation for the vagina that they use for various complaints. And really, on the Egyptian papyri have all of the major methods that we're using today, plus some extra ones. We don't have an anal application as much as we should, a rectal application. And that, I hear from the underground, is a great way to get cannabinoids in your system really cleanly if you need a whole bunch of them. And it's funny how in some ways it's kind of limited what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And I wanted two last questions before I let you go. The last one was going to be about negatives. And if you see people who this just doesn't agree with them for various reasons, and if some people can find ways around those negatives that they can still use it, and what about those who just find out that THC or even CBD rich cannabis isn't for them?
Yeah, I mean, I have had some patients where they just got so extreme, they got so hyper alert by the cannabinoids, it just really triggered their system, and I mean, not necessarily that they felt that they had the euphoric side effect, but that they just really did not respond well to even CBD, actually some of these patients have been patients with PTSD, where their nervous system is already really in kind of super alert. So that kind of surprised me, because a lot of people with PTSD also has great benefit from cannabis, especially in the US. But yeah, some of the other things that you can run into is that people don't have an effect. That it simply doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't help the pain. And I see this in maybe 30% or something like that of the cases, obviously, because we also don't have that many products available. If we had more and more kind of different chemovars, and if we had more products to offer, I'm sure that we could find better solutions for more patients. But there are just some people where it doesn't actually work. And then, of course, some people are very sensitive to THC, and they simply feel that it makes them like stoned, and most people don't want that. But if you have the oil, you can dose it in like very, very, very low doses, so you can just have like a few drops. But the thing is, sometimes when you have too little, it doesn't actually help on the symptom that you were trying to treat in the first place. So it's like, if you're too sensitive to it, you might not be able to get up into that dose that you need to treat the pain. So yeah, those are some of the things that you can run into. And then, of course, when I have, sometimes I have patients with addiction, or a history of severe mental illness in the family. Maybe they also had problems with anxiety and even like psychosis, and then I don't prescribe it, because then unless I prescribe CBD, of course, but I wouldn't prescribe THC rich cannabis to those patients, just because I wouldn't risk that they get an adverse effect.
Good. That's great harm reduction for people to know, I think. And so the last question I wanted to ask, what conditions do you think cannabis is the most underrated for, and that you wish more people knew that cannabis would be worth trying? Some
of the things that I am constantly impressed with, and where I see incredible results, it's for these very difficult to treat conditions like fibromyalgia, migraines, but even stuff like IBS, IBS, and also the inflammatory bowel diseases. They are super difficult to treat and affect people so much, and it's often young people. And what I see is that young people shouldn't be on loads of different drugs, in my opinion, if they can avoid it. And what I see is that I have a patient with fibromyalgia, and they have just been through the whole investigation of trying to find out what it was. They couldn't figure anything out. They got fibromyalgia diagnosis. They are in their 20s, and their life is just it's really not great, right? When you're in pain all the time. And so they start they start using cannabis, and suddenly it's like they say they get their life back. And I think that's where it's so incredible. Those people with migraines as well, and suddenly they go from having 6 attacks a week, or several attacks a day, to having an attack a month. And it's that is a huge difference. And these are often young people who are really handicapped and living the lives that they want to do. So I think that those conditions are a little bit underrated, because it can really transform people's lives.
Great. Thank you for sharing the kind of insight from the front lines.
Yeah.
Dr. Julie Moltke, I want to thank you so much for your work in spreading the word about cannabis and about holistic health as well. It was really a pleasure to talk today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Lex. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in. To listen to other episodes, check out pluscbdoil.com, listen on all the podcast platforms, or see us on YouTube. Subscribe to the CV Sciences YouTube channel to see each new episode. And if you'd like to buy any of our fine products, use the coupon code LEXFILES for 25% off. If you have any questions, compliments, or suggestions, feel free to write me at research@cvsciences.com, and please follow the podcast on Twitter @The Lex Files Show, where I try to keep it fun. If you enjoyed this program, please give us a like on your favorite platform or share a link to your social media. It means a lot to us. The Lex Files is produced by Matt Payne. The YouTube videos are by Brendan Cleek. Thank you to Tina Molnar and Jasmine Morris for the visuals, and the music is by Jake Bradford Sharp. Our sponsor is CV Sciences, makers of America's favorite CBD oil. And I'm Lex Pelger, signing off.